When you think back to like a really pivotal memory from high school, it's almost never this perfectly accurate, objective documentary recording of what actually happened.
Oh, definitely not. It's never just a list of facts.
Right. It's not this crisp, high-definition video in your brain. It's more like looking through a highly saturated, totally blurry photo filter.
Yeah, the edges are all fuzzy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The colors are turned way up, and, I mean, you probably don't remember the exact dialogue at all.
Yeah.
But you remember with crystal clarity exactly how you felt.
That overwhelming emotion of it.
Yes, that vivid emotional lens. And that's actually the core thesis of this new video game called Mixtape.
Which is such a fascinating title for this.
It really is. So welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. Today we are unpacking a really comprehensive review of this new release. It just dropped on the PS5, Xbox Series X and S, Nintendo Switch 2, and PC.
And, the game is essentially trying to prove a very specific idea that the review points out, which is that nostalgia isn't memories, it's feelings.
It's feelings.
Yeah.
And exploring how interactive media actually manages to bottle up that specific feeling is what makes this whole source material so compelling to me.
I mean, we are looking at a game that focuses entirely on that really fleeting kind of liminal space, right between finishing high school and stepping into the cold reality of adulthood.
That terrifying waiting room of life.
Exactly. And it relies on this incredibly eclectic soundtrack, some deeply bizarre mini games, and a highly specific visual aesthetic to just simulate the chaotic nature of remembering our own youth.
So to really grasp the weight of what this game is attempting,
yeah,
I think we first have to look at the era it's set in, right?
Oh, absolutely. The foundation is key here.
Yeah, because it builds this very specific foundation before it starts messing with your expectations. The game drops you squarely into the late 1990s.
The golden age of suburban angst.
Right. And the narrative setup focuses on this trio of teenagers on the absolute eve of a massive final party.
On paper, they're ostensibly just hunting for booze for this rager.
But the review points out the real subtext here. What they are actually doing is desperately dragging out their final night together.
Yeah, they're terrified. They are trying to freeze time before adulthood intrudes and just ruins this whole dynamic they've built.
It's basically the quintessential coming-of-age premise.
It really is. And the characters themselves, they are cast into very deliberate roles.
Right, tell me about the trio.
So you have Stacey Rockford, who is the music-obsessed protagonist.
Okay, the music snob.
Exactly. Then you have Van Slater, who the review describes as this creative genius, but also a wannabe hippie who completely missed that movement by about 2 decades.
Oh, the classic out-of-time stoner kid.
Yeah, exactly that guy. And then rounding out the trio is Cassandra Marino. She's this wannabe rebel who just feels entirely trapped by this suffocating perfectionism of her very authoritarian suburban parents.
I have to pause on that character lineup for a second, though.
What's the holdup?
Because looking at those descriptions, it sounds completely derivative, doesn't it? You have the music snob, the stoner hippie, the repressed suburban rebel.
The tropes are definitely loud.
Yeah. The review even explicitly states the game is unapologetically inspired by John Hughes movies, Kevin Smith's Mallrats, and Alan Moyle's Empire Records.
Oh, heavy hitters of the 90s era.
That's my point. If a game is just relying on these fully established 90s movie archetypes, doesn't it run the risk of essentially being a cinematic cover band?
A cover band? That's an interesting way to put it.
Like, if I want a John Hughes experience, I can just go watch The Breakfast Club, Mimicking those exact beats just seems like it would rob the game of any truly original identity.
Well, it might sound reductive at first glance, I'll give you that. But if you think about teenage psychology, teenagers inherently put themselves into those archetypal boxes.
Oh, it's true. We kind of cast ourselves in our own movies.
Exactly. When you are 17, you don't have a fully formed, complex adult identity yet. So you just try on these distinct personas.
Right. You wake up one day and decide, I'm the misunderstood rebel now.
Or the tortured artist, or like Stacey, the cooler-than-thou music snob. The game leverages that actual reality. It isn't just copying John Hughes to be lazy.
So it's more of an authentic reflection of the age.
Yeah, it's mimicking how teenagers actually view themselves and their friend groups in real life. Those film inspirations work because they basically serve as an emotional shorthand.
Oh, I see. So it gets you there faster.
Right. When you invoke the spirit of Empire Records or Mallrats, you don't have to spend 5 hours of gameplay establishing the specific flavor of suburban ennui.
The player just immediately understands the baseline of disaffected youth.
Exactly. It provides this comfortable, familiar foundation for you to stand on.
Okay, so it gives you the comfort before it pulls the rug out.
That is the brilliance of the game, at least according to the review. Once you are comfortable in that familiar cinematic territory, it uses the actual mechanics of interactive gameplay to fundamentally subvert how you experience it.
It stops being a movie you're watching, basically.
Yeah, and it becomes a chaotic memory you are living from the inside out.
Which is wild. And that transition from these passive cinematic tropes to an active subjective memory, that is where the moment-to-moment gameplay really takes over, isn't it?
It's the core loop of the game.
Because the narrative isn't driven by traditional cutscenes. Instead, the whole thing is propelled by just exploring these teenage bedrooms and finding physical trinkets.
Like an archaeologist of your own youth.
Yeah, exactly. You find an old photo or like a dusty trophy, and when Stacy interacts with it, it sparks this playable recollection.
The review actually refers to these as Bueller-esque whimsical tangents.
Which is such a great phrase.
Mm-hmm.
And the defining characteristic of these tangents is that they completely detach from objective reality, right?
Oh, 100%. They lean entirely into the subjective, totally outsized feeling of the memory.
They aren't trying to be documentaries.
Not at all. The gameplay sequences in these flashbacks are described as gloriously weird, precisely because they're portraying the emotion of the event, not the factual reality of what happened.
Right, and the review lists a few of these, and they're incredibly strange to read about. Like, in one memory, you are guiding a stoned van around, and the game camera literally warps and distorts your view of the environment.
Just messing with the player's perception directly.
Yeah, and in another one, you are exploring this abandoned theme park, but you play through the memory as if you are a giant Godzilla-style kaiju monster stomping through all the rides.
See, that kaiju sequence is just a perfect example of prioritizing feelings over facts.
How so?
Well, think about the emotional scaling happening there. Sneaking into a closed theme park as a teenager, that feels monumental.
Oh, feels like the biggest thing in the world. So dangerous.
It feels dangerous and totally larger than life. You feel like a destructive force entering the space built for children.
Okay, so the game takes that internal feeling and makes it literal.
Exactly. It literally turns you into a giant monster to represent how massive and world-breaking that specific moment felt to the kids experiencing it.
Because the reality would be pretty boring.
Right. Showing 3 normal-sized teenagers just walking through an empty parking lot, that would be factually accurate, sure, but it would completely fail to capture the actual adrenaline of the memory.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And that concept translating internal feeling into literal gameplay mechanics,
Yeah.
it's most obvious in another sequence the review highlights, which is an interactive first kiss.
Oh boy, yeah. This part is fascinating.
Because the player is tasked with manually controlling both tongues during the kiss.
Just reading that sounds stressful.
Right. Now, my first thought reading that was just how fundamentally awkward and uncoordinated that sounds to actually play with a controller.
It sounds like a total mess.
But that is the entire point, isn't it? Like, if you watch a first kiss in a movie, it looks so romantic and smooth.
Tragically choreographed.
Yeah, but actually experiencing a real first kiss, it is pure internal panic.
Oh, absolutely.
It is supreme physical clumsiness. You have no idea what you're doing. You don't know where your hands should go.
Am I breathing too much? Am I breathing too little?
Exactly. And by forcing the player to physically manage these awkward, uncoordinated inputs on a controller, the game is turning that mental panic into literal button prompts.
The friction on the controller maps perfectly to the friction of the memory itself. You aren't just observing their misspent youth.
You're sweating through it with them.
Yeah, the interactivity forces you to participate in the physical and emotional chaos of it. It bridges the gap between watching a character's history and literally feeling the texture of that history in your own hands.
But, visual memories, even the interactive ones, they are famously fragmented and unreliable.
We fill in a lot of the blanks ourselves.
We really do. And that is likely why our brains relied so heavily on auditory anchors to catalog our emotional states.
Oh, music is the ultimate time machine.
Right. We can forget what a room looked like, but hearing a specific song immediately teleports us back to exactly how we felt in that room. And the source material spends a massive amount of time dissecting how this game uses music.
Because moving from visual nostalgia to auditory nostalgia is really where Mixtape cements its emotional impact.
Yeah, it's right in the name of the game.
Exactly. And the protagonist, Stacey Rockford, she is essentially the architect of this anchor. The review notes that she has this high-fidelity worthy, cooler-than-thou taste in music.
Which they use in a really interesting way. The game actually has Stacy break the fourth wall.
Looking directly into the camera.
Right. She looks right at you to introduce each track. She explains exactly why a specific song is important to the upcoming moment before it even starts playing.
That is a deeply intimate narrative choice, I have to say.
It really is.
By having the protagonist speak directly to the camera, directly to you, the player, the game is effectively handing you its own personal mixtape.
Like reaching through the screen.
Yeah, I mean, think about the vulnerability of making a mixtape for someone in real life.
Oh, it's terrifying. It's so much pressure.
You are essentially saying, hey, this specific sequence of sounds explains how I feel far better than my own words ever could.
Yeah, you're bearing your soul.
The game is establishing that exact level of trust with the player.
And the track list they've curated to build that trust is incredibly eclectic. It doesn't just rely on, the most obvious overplayed 90s radio hits that we've heard in a million commercials.
No, it goes way deeper than that.
It really digs deep. The review highlights these achingly cool period hits like Lush's Monochrome and the Smashing Pumpkins' Love.
Great tracks.
Yeah, but it also pulls from much older new wave tracks like Devo's That's Good, and it even includes these extremely niche tracks like Harper's Bazaar's Witchy Taito.
Which, again, totally reflects the reality of a teenager obsessively curating their identity through music, right?
How do you mean?
Well, a music snob in the late 90s wouldn't just listen to whatever was currently charting on MTV.
No, they'd actively hate whatever was on MTV.
Exactly. They would dig into the past to find these obscure tracks just to prove how refined and unique their tastes were compared to their peers.
You probably haven't heard of them.
Yes. So including those niche tracks adds a tremendous amount of authenticity to Stacy's character.
But looking at that list of achingly cool hipster tracks, there is one inclusion that the review points out that initially just baffled me.
Oh, I know the one you're talking about.
The game uses a song from 1986. Stan Bush's The Touch.
An absolute classic.
I mean, if you aren't familiar, that is the incredibly cheesy, very synth-heavy anthem from the original animated Transformers, the movie.
Yes, it is.
My first assumption reading that was that using a song about giant fighting robots had to be this ironic hipster joke.
Just a total gag.
Yeah. But the review calls this specific musical cue a laser-targeted attack on the feels.
Yeah.
So how does a bombastic 80s cartoon song genuinely evoke deep, resonant emotion in a game about suburban teenage angst?
Well, that just speaks to the alchemy of a perfectly timed mixtape, doesn't it?
Okay, break that down for me.
A song in a vacuum is just a sequence of notes. It only gains profound emotional weight when you attach a specific memory or life event to it.
Right, it's the context.
Exactly. The game reframes this objectively cheesy cartoon anthem by placing it at the exact right narrative beat.
So it ignores the robots entirely.
Yeah, it completely strips away the original context of the movie it was written for.
Yeah.
And it replaces it with this soaring, desperate optimism of youth just standing on the brink of adulthood.
Wow, that's a huge shift.
It proves that a song's emotional resonance isn't determined by its critical acclaim or its cultural coolness, but entirely by the emotional state of the person listening to it at that pivotal moment.
Okay, so the context completely elevates the track. That's brilliant. We've explored the narrative setup, the bizarre but effective memory mechanics, and this amazing curation of the music.
The high points, basically.
Right. But the source material does not shy away from the fact that the ambition of this game sometimes trips over its own execution.
It's definitely not flawless.
No, there are clear mechanical flaws that create a lot of friction.
The reviewer points out a very distinct disconnect between the emotional heights the game reaches and the actual tactile experience of playing it.
The moment-to-moment feeling of holding the controller.
Right. Those playable memory sequences, like the kissing, the kaiju, the warped camera, they are conceptually brilliant, but mechanically they're very thin.
The review actually compares them to WarioWare microgames.
Yeah, which means they are fleeting, heavily simplified interactions rather than these robust, deeply developed gameplay systems.
And then there is the visual style, which seems to be this major double-edged sword for the game.
The art direction is gorgeous, but yeah, it has a cost.
The game utilizes a pseudo-stop-motion aesthetic. It drops frames on purpose, looking very much like the animated movie Spider-Man, into the Spider-Verse.
Right, it looks like a living painting or a flip book, rather than this fluid, high frame rate 3D simulation.
And there is a sound psychological reason to use that art style for a game about memory, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Human memory doesn't function like a continuous 60 frames per second video recording.
We don't remember every single step down a hallway.
Exactly. We don't remember the fluid motion. We remember the fragmented keyframes.
The snapshots.
Yeah, we remember the flash of a smile or the sudden slam of a locker door or maybe just the specific angle of the light in the room. So dropping frames mimics how our brains actually store these high emotion events.
And while that makes complete sense for those bespoke, trippy memory sequences, the review notes it creates a massive problem in the downtime of the game.
In between moments.
Right. When you are just maneuvering Stacy around the bedrooms in the very mundane spaces between memories, that deliberately low frame rate makes the character feel just awful to control.
It's a real chore.
The reviewer describes it as feeling like steering a juddering marionette.
Which is such a visceral way to describe bad controls. But that is the consequence of committing so heavily to an aesthetic.
It backfires.
Yeah, when the on-screen action lacks the high emotional charge of a memory, those dropped frames just feel like lag.
It just feels broken.
Exactly. It stops being this artistic representation of memory and just becomes a genuinely frustrating user experience.
A juddering marionette. I just can't get over that phrase. But the fascinating part of this review is that these mechanical stumbles do not ruin the final verdict of the game.
Not at all.
The reviewer explicitly states, "This is about feelings, though, not cold mechanics, and their Mixtape utterly succeeds."
Which is a huge statement for a video game review.
It really is. And if we think about the title of the game itself, a physical cassette mixtape from the 90s is actually the perfect analogy for this specific type of friction.
Oh, that's a great point. How so?
Well, cassette tapes were a mechanically flawed medium, right? The audio quality was never pristine.
There was always that constant background hiss.
Always. And the tape itself would occasionally get chewed up in the stereo deck. It jerked and juddered, much like the character animations described in the review.
You'd have to wind it back up with a pencil.
Exactly. But that tape hiss didn't ruin the music. It
No.
grounded the music in reality.
It gave it character.
Yes. The imperfections proved it was a physical object that lived in the world with you.
You know, the game's clunky moments really function the same way. The physical friction of the controller, the slight annoyance of those marionette controls, they are basically part of the texture of the era the game is celebrating.
It fits the 90s vibe perfectly.
It does, and it suggests something really interesting about player priorities.
What's that?
Often, smooth, responsive mechanics are the absolute baseline requirement for a video game to even be considered good.
Right, if it lags, it's trash.
Exactly. But Mixtape argues that when a narrative is emotionally potent enough, when it successfully connects with the player's own internal sense of nostalgia, the emotional truth of the experience completely overrides the physical friction of the medium.
And that overriding emotional truth leads directly into the review's final conclusion.
That big takeaway.
Yeah. Despite the thin microgames and the frustrating downtime controls, Mixtape succeeds as this incredibly rare coming-of-age experience.
The reviewer notes that it hits with barely a dud note.
Wrapping up as a short, dreamlike journey that, quote, plays like a memory you wish you had.
A memory you wish you had. That perfectly encapsulates why this matters well beyond the scope of just a standard game review.
It's bigger than just one game.
It really highlights how interactive media is evolving. We are no longer limited to just, looking at old photographs or passively listening to old songs to trigger nostalgia.
We can't just play it now.
Right. Creators are finding ways to synthesize the actual feeling of youth. They're using the mechanics of play, the curation of music, and this fragmented visual language of dreams to literally simulate the emotional weight of our histories.
It is a powerful reminder that our tools for exploring the past are becoming far more sophisticated.
Absolutely.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, there is a final lingering thought that really builds on everything we've discussed today.
Let's hear it.
Well, we started by comparing nostalgia to a highly saturated, blurry photo filter. And the game and the review heavily imply that nostalgia is entirely about these subjective feelings, not the objective facts.
Right. Feelings over facts.
If that is true, I want you to think about the retro media, the old movies, and the classic albums from your own youth that you might obsessively return to today.
We all have them.
We do. When we dive back into those old favorites, are we actually trying to remember the reality of the past? Or are we just desperately trying to access the person we were and the capacity for feeling we possessed when we look through that vivid, saturated lens for the very first time?
Oh, wow. It forces you to question whether you are chasing a specific time or just chasing a past version of yourself.
Exactly. Keep questioning what you are looking for in those old playlists and memories. We will catch you on the next deep dive.